Welcome back to the Rich Eisen Show. This man has a gig tonight at the Novo here in Los Angeles before moving on to the Mirage in Las Vegas tomorrow night, all part of the Mouthful of Shame tour. Jim Norton, good to see you, sir.
Thanks for having me.
How are you?
I'm good. I didn't realize I was going to be on camera, so I'm like obsessed that my stupid doll shoes aren't showing.
Let me see the doll
They're
shoes.
I have a problem buying. Look at what a fruit I look like with my bare ankles showing. This is really a terrible.
Yeah, you do have like socks that be applicable for golf right now.
Yeah, they're awful. I thought this was radio, and I show up and they're like, no, you're on camera.
No,
I'm like, oh, good. I'm glad I have the new doll shoes.
You would not have been the first guest that I have loaned socks to.
Really?
If you had wanted me to do that.
Who actually needed socks besides me?
We have yet to out him, have we?
He's
asked us not to do
be
it
outed,
specifically.
but you've kind of put him out there now.
I sort of outed him with the Hour 2 tag yesterday, but none of you were paying attention.
Matthew Berry of ESPN Fantasy.
Did he not have socks, or were his socks awful?
I think
He had white socks on with like a dress shoes.
Because he was going on a plane, and he just, there were extenuating circumstances.
Okay, but he came in like a real hillbilly, not realizing that was going to be on
Pretty
camera.
much.
All right, I understand.
So the pale-ankled Jim Norton here on the Rich Eisen
Yeah,
Show.
I really do. Old cadaver legs. I really am depressing looking.
Now you're a New Jersey guy, right?
I
You're
am,
from
yeah.
Jersey. Now you were born in Bayonne.
Yes.
Right? Correct.
Yes.
But did you ever live there in Bayonne? Or
No,
not really?
we moved out when I was a kid, and I moved to New York when I was about 32, and
Okay.
I did stand up in New York for like the first 10 years of my career.
The only reason why I ask is I'm from Staten Island, across the Bayonne Bridge.
Oh, okay.
Normally, that's
Yeah.
what I feel somewhat of a kinship with you, just looking and hearing you and seeing you in person for the first time.
Yeah, it's that unshakable, creepy East Coast thing. I have a love-hate thing with Staten Island.
Okay.
Because I'd say the first 10 years of my career, half of that was spent on the West Shore Expressway, trying to get to Brooklyn or to Long Island, cutting in from New Jersey over the Outer Bridge crossing.
And
It's a disaster.
how bad did it stink?
It's the worst
By the way,
place on earth.
you were driving past and occasionally through the world's largest garbage dump until they shut it down about 5 years ago.
I didn't even know they shut it down. I really didn't.
They did, and people one day will probably be like skiing down it. It's going to be a beautiful open area at some point. They're going to build a park over the landfill.
Didn't they
At
make
some
that
point.
it was like New York's dump, and then there's like $1 million houses on top of the dump? It's like,
It
who
may
got
happen.
that through? Who was in office that they're like, that sounds like a great idea for Staten Island?
I think a guy named Trump might have been out.
Oh, really? Oh, good.
I don't know. I'm just
I
throwing
love
that
him.
out there. I'm just throwing that out there. Jim Norton joining me here on the show. So you're a Yankee Giant? Do you have a certain...
No, I hate the Giants.
Okay. Why?
Because my family liked them. I'm a Cowboy fan. I became a Cowboy fan because my first memory of the Cowboys,
Yeah.
Super Bowl 13, it was when they
Nice.
lost 35-31. Jackie Smith dropped the pass in the end zone. And I knew so little about football at that time. I was watching them kneel at the end, Bradshaw take the knee. I didn't know what they were doing. So I was
Yeah.
about 12 or 13 years old. That's my first football memory, is that loss.
Yeah.
And my family hated Dallas so much, and they all wanted Pittsburgh to win that Super Bowl. And I just started rooting against my family.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So where does that come from?
I don't know. It was just one of those things where you don't know who to root for, so you pick the one that nobody else is rooting for.
Because normally, the number of people who come on this show say, I root for this because my dad did, I root for this because my mom did, and I was
Right.
in the cradle is when I became the fan because I had no choice. You went the opposite way.
I went the opposite way, and with basketball, I like the Lakers, and people are like, what, do you just like the good teams? No. I was walking to a Caldor one time, and I see Abdul-Jabbar on TV and Magic Johnson. They're losing to the Celtics, and I recognized Abdul-Jabbar from Airplane. Like, that's in the 80s. I'm like, oh, I kind of like Kareem, and I started watching, and all of a sudden, it roped me in. I don't know what it is about it that got me, but it roped me in. So my first experience with them was losing a championship.
Kareem is one of the best cameos in the history of movies.
Oh, an Airplane?
Yeah.
Phenomenal.
Where he tells that kid, he grabs him, he says, you tell your dad to drag Bob Lanier's butt up and down the court every night. It's fantastic.
Yeah, and it's funny when you go back and you watch him in Game of Death. Oh, was that the one with
That's right.
Bruce Lee?
Of course.
Yeah, he's had a pretty interesting career. Interesting guy, Kareem. I don't know him well at all. I've interviewed him and I've met him briefly. But he seems like he can be kind of tough to get to know.
Well, he was in this seat, guys, about a couple of months ago?
Yeah, about 4 or 5 months ago.
Promoting the Sherlock Holmes, the Mycroft. He writes about Mycroft Holmes, novels about
Really?
Sherlock
He writes
Holmes'
novels?
brother. He's an interesting guy.
He's a great writer. He writes on time.com. You'll see him pop up with these social articles.
Yeah, Kareem.
I saw him on a flight one time, and I forget where I was going, but he gets on, and he sits in the back, and I felt bad for the guy because he's so big that he literally can't get comfortable, and he was sitting there with a blanket over his head. I swear it was like E.T., just so he could kind of like block out the light. You just see this giant lump with a blanket over it. I'm like, oh, that poor bastard. That's a rough way to travel.
I guess so.
That's a rough way to travel.
Right. So who's the one athlete, I guess, that you have met, or one that you would basically, because of your childhood, freak out over me?
You know, it's funny. I've met most of the guys I've loved. I've met Ali and Joe Frazier and all these
kidding.
guys.
Ali, you've met Ali?
I met Ali. My manager knew the guy who ran his company. We sat in his hotel room with him for 45 minutes in New York. It was me, him, my manager, our mutual friend, and Ali's wife. And we just sat there with Muhammad Ali for 45 minutes and chatted. It was pretty amazing.
Man.
Yeah, you don't know what to say. It's like, what do you say when you're with, like, there's nobody I wanted to meet more. And then I met him, and I just stared at him. Hi, champ. I really was creepy. But it made me feel bad for Ali. It's like, because, his motor skills are a little shut down because of the Parkinson's. And he probably wanted to go, who are these creeps? Why are they in my hotel room? But he just kind of has to sit there and be nice. But I would say James Worthy. Big game James, number 42 from the Lakers. That's a guy, I always loved him because he always played well in the big games.
Yes.
And there was some kind of like a prostitution scandal, which I certainly relate to. So I'm like, I want to meet James Worthy for that reason. That's probably the athlete I want to meet more than anybody.
Jim Norton's Mouthful of Shame tour just announced brand new dates. So you're doing a gig tonight. You're here, and then you're doing a gig tonight.
Tonight, and then I fly tomorrow morning to Vegas, and then I go back out on the road. I'm shooting a special at the end of July. So it's like, you want to make sure that you're ready.
West Hampton, New York. So you're at West Hampton Beach Performing Arts Center.
I've never been out there to the Hamptons. It's funny that it's like when
Are
you're
you kidding me? You've never been out to the Hamptons?
When you're in New York, that's a different world. It's a different part of the planet. It's 3 hours east in traffic. It's like, who wants to do that for what?
3 hours sometimes when there's no traffic. I mean, it can take some time to get out to the Hamptons.
Yeah, it's going to stink. I mean, the gig will be great, I'm sure. Come see it. But I'm not, the drive is going to suck.
Albuquerque, New Mexico. You're right there in Breaking Bad country on the 17th of June. Salt Lake, then Orlando, Florida on my birthday, the 24th. Atlanta, Georgia. Edmond, Oklahoma. Fargo, North Dakota are your upcoming tour dates.
Yeah, all the big cities.
.com/tour. You enjoying doing this stand-up?
I love it, man. I love it.
I did it back in college.
Did you really?
I did. And it's the toughest thing I've ever had to do.
Why?
Because you have to read a room, and you've got, sometimes the room has got 5 people in it.
Right.
And sometimes you've got a room with 500 people in it, and it was nerve-wracking.
The 5 people can be scarier because it's too personal. It's like talking to 5 individuals, and if they're not with you, you're dead. 500 people, at least, it's a group mentality, but with 5 individuals, is scarier to me than 500.
Right, and so you're an MMA guy that I know, because you've been talking about it. So what do you think of the Mayweather-Conor McGregor conversation that's out there?
It's like, I get why McGregor would do it for $50 million if that's a real offer. I mean, he'd be stupid not to. But it's like, it depends on what they do. If they fight mixed martial arts, which Mayweather would never do, McGregor would murder him. And if they just straight up box, I mean, Mayweather's going to kill him. I mean, McGregor's a great fighter, but you can't box one of the greatest defensive fighters ever and expect to do well. So it's like one of those crossovers. It's like, it's never going to happen. I mean, Randy Couture beat up James Toney easily in an MMA match. So it's like, why would any other boxer put himself in that position?
Well, I guess McGregor's trying to figure out how he can perhaps break out of what he feels might be a constricting relationship with UFC. I think that's what perhaps this is born out of right now. Wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think he wants to branch out, and he lives a very lavish lifestyle. I don't know McGregor, but it seems like he enjoys spending money, so he wants to go out and do big fights, which is pretty smart. But it's like the UFC is kind of what made the guy. They put him on the map. It's like, why do you want to leave there? You have a tremendous amount of fans. He's the biggest draw in the UFC. It's like, where are you going?
So you don't think you could catch Mayweather at one point?
With a punch?
Yeah.
No. I have as good a shot at catching Mayweather with a punch. No, and I don't even like Mayweather. I'd love to see McGregor beat him up. I can't stand Mayweather.
Right.
But there's no way he's going to outbox Floyd Mayweather. I mean, Pacquiao couldn't do it. I mean, he's not going to do it. I think Mayweather's a boring fighter, to be honest with you.
Well, I mean, the number of people that have spent money on... Well, there was more action in the Rangers... in the Texas Rangers Blue Jays game a couple of weeks ago when the second baseman caught Jose Bautista with a right cross than you've seen in Mayweather fights.
I know.
I mean, and that was free watching the Rangers and the Blue Jays the other day.
Did you see the Pacquiao fight? I thought it was. I haven't watched boxing in a year, which is, by the way, why UFC. Thank you, boxing, for being so awful and never giving us the fights we want. That's why UFC is so famous, because there's so many great fights and they always give you the matchups you want.
And they seem to be once every other month at this point in time.
Yeah,
the UFC fights. So you got one here in Los Angeles coming up next week.
199. Yeah, it's Rockhold against Michael Bisping, because Weidman got hurt. Yeah, I think he hurt his back or he slipped a disc. And Bisping is like a guy, he just beat Anderson Silva in a tremendous bloody battle. And I really want to see him take it now. It's like, I didn't think he was going to be in line for a championship in a long time. So it's nice to see. He's a really nice guy, and he's just a tough, they're tough dudes, man, these UFC guys. They're legitimately fighters, you know?
Well, thanks for coming on, Jim. I appreciate it. Certainly on a day of a gig that you have here in L.A.
Thank you. I didn't actually break new ground, did I? Saying the UFC guys are tough. They like to fight.
You are.
Good
very,
point,
very
Jim.
thick limb. But the trouble is, people just can't hear you over your ankles right now. Anyway.
I know. It's like crack insight. That's why I'm on the show.
Good to see you, buddy.
Thank you, buddy.
You got it. Jim Norton, at Jim Norton on Twitter, jimnorton.com/tour to find out how you can get tickets to the Mouthful of Shame tour.
The Rich Eisen Show, weekdays at noon Eastern on Audience.